It is okay. You have full permission from here on out to protect your nervous system and prioritize your emotional well-being. Use discernment. Work with your sensitivities. Because the goal here isn't to try to override your nervous system and toughen up. The goal is alignment. Your nervous system doesn't lie. It communicates. And when you learn to listen, you can stop betraying yourself and start leading yourself based off your own truth. Welcome to Grow with Robin Breckenridge, a podcast about stepping into the most fully expressed, aligned, and conscious version of yourself. Here we dive into the real work of personal growth, establishing boundaries, understanding your patterns, building self-trust, healing emotional wounds, and creating relationships that feel safe, authentic, and fulfilling. I'm Robin, a life and relationship coach, and in each episode, we'll explore the tools, insights, and conversations that will help you not just improve your life and relationships, but truly transform them. You don't have to just go through it. Let's grow through it, and let's do it together. So if you and I were stuck in a room and we couldn't get out, and there was an alarm going off, we would eventually tune that alarm out. We wouldn't hear it anymore because we would have to in order to survive in that room. And then one day someone walks in the room and they go, wow, this alarm is deafening. Oh my gosh. And we remember, oh my gosh, there's an alarm going off. We forgot about it. We tuned it out. And I feel like that happens to us growing up when we truly don't have a lot of choice in the home environment we live in. And we can't just pack up and go move to a more aligned space or family system. But what is happening the whole time is our nervous system is sending alerts or alarms. We just tune them out. Maybe nobody ever acknowledged those alarms. Maybe we didn't talk about them in our family system. Maybe we never learned how to manage them or what to do with them. So it was easier to detach from them in order to survive. Well, guess what? In this work, I'm the person that comes in and pokes the head in the room and goes, oh my gosh, there's alarms going off. And then my client goes, wow, oh wait, there are? Oh, I remember. Okay, I'm starting to see it. And then we get curious and we go, okay, what alarm? Is it the fire alarm? Is it the carbon monoxide alarm? What is that alarm alerting us to? What need is there to protect ourselves or to keep ourselves safe? So in this work, I call those alarms often emotional allergies. Because I figured that people, and some of you who are listening might have like food allergies, like a peanut allergy. That must suck, right? Like whether you like it or not, if that particular allergen is around you, you're going to have a reaction. And then I realized that that is very true for emotions or situations or behaviors that we've experienced in our life. That our body, our nervous system, the threat detector that it is, will alert us to a familiar threat or something that isn't safe. So much like regular allergies, your nervous system can develop emotional allergies based on past relational trauma or experiences. And these are not random reactions. They are pattern sensitivities to specific dynamics that once felt unsafe. So if you grew up feeling judged often, you may now have an allergy to judgment. If you grew up with inconsistency, you may now be highly sensitive to unavailability and inconsistency. If you grew up emotionally engulfed, you may be allergic to relational overwhelm. When those dynamics present themselves, your body will react very similarly to someone who has a peanut allergy. Again, whether they like it or not, their body is going to remind them that that little nut can harm them. So here is the biggest part of this episode that I want to land with you today. Your nervous system doesn't lie. So I know that a big core part of the work that I do with my clients has to do with trust. And I know, remember, my definition of trust is data over time, even with our own relationship to ourselves. So when in doubt, please know that you can trust your nervous system. We just have to learn how to speak the same language it speaks. Now, sometimes there's a really, really great book, if anybody hasn't read it or isn't familiar with it, called The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. And the concept of that book is that our body holds things and reacts faster than our brain does. So a great example is someone maybe who has experienced PTSD in war or battle, and they're on leave and they're walking down the street and a car backfires. And before their brain is even processing what happened, they're already underneath a car taking cover. Now, I want you to think of that example. The body, the nervous system is remembering, oh, this trauma, this noise indicates that I'm not safe or there's a threat. But sometimes it isn't able to discern that that same threat isn't happening, meaning that this is just a car backfiring. We're not back on the battlefield. So sometimes your body can relate it to an event that is not happening to the degree that it happened to you before. So I don't want to call that overreacting, but it does require us to get curious when we feel activated. Is this something that is currently happening in my present reality? Or is this something that is based off a trauma that happened to me before? So we'll get into this a little bit more as we go forward in this episode. So your body remembers these things, and it might remember it from the severity that it happened before, but it does not lie. So our job is not to silence it, intellectualize it. Our job is to tune into it, get curious, and get curious with ways that we can protect ourselves and get ourselves back to a baseline of safety. Now, one of the challenges of this is that a lot of us had experiences where the best thing we could do was override these allergies. A lot of us had experiences where people gave us feedback that we were too sensitive, that we were overreacting, that we were being dramatic. Maybe we were being too extreme and we need to give people the benefit of the doubt. Maybe the feedback is that we're taking things too personally. So instead of protecting ourselves or being able to get curious with what that allergy or reaction is trying to tell us, we explain it away. We rationalize it. We try harder. We stay longer. We tolerate. And over time, we start to distrust our own body. We might think, oh my gosh, why am I being so extra? This isn't even that big of a deal. I want you to remember something. Self-regulation is not self-abandonment. Calming yourself down does not mean convincing yourself that something is okay when it isn't. Remember, our brain, not so black and white. There's a lot of things that go on in there. But our nervous system, our body, tends to be pretty black and white. It says things like, you're safe, you're not safe. This is an alignment, it's not. Stay, run. When an emotional allergy comes up and you have a strong reaction to something, this is your nervous system communicating, I am not safe. There is a perceived threat in my environment or in the story I'm telling myself. So instead of asking, how do I stop reacting like this? How do I not make this impact me the way that it is? I want you to ask or get curious, what is this reaction or feeling trying to communicate to me? What need might be underneath this feeling or reaction? So for instance, if you are allergic to judgment and you have data that someone is consistently judgmental when you're around them, you can stop disclosing anything that you don't want to be judged on around that person. That is a really neat way to say, okay, I'm allergic to judgment. This has harmed me in the past. I can show up in ways to protect myself right now. Now, remember, not all boundaries need to be communicated. A lot of the time, boundaries are internal. They're in agreement with yourself. So we don't have to go around to everyone and be like, you can't judge me. You're being judgmental. We can shift the way we show up to that relationship or that person, and we can shift the access they have to vulnerable information that we don't want to be judged on. That is not avoidance. That's discernment. Remember, discernment means good judgment. So if you're allergic to emotional unavailability and someone you're dating is inconsistent, distant, unclear, you can protect yourself by exercising good judgment. There's that discernment word again. You can choose to leave. You can choose to end the relationship, not because you're not attracted to this person. And of course, just because someone's unavailable doesn't mean that they're all bad. There might be a lot of things that you like about this person. So I'm not saying that leaving is the easiest choice, but what it means is that you are in alignment with the fact that that type of behavior will never sit peacefully in your nervous system. And your nervous system will never stop doing its job. It will always alert you to threat. So what it means from an attachment perspective is that if this type of behavior is present and we know that you're allergic to it, we know you have a sensitivity to it, you cannot go forward in the relationship in a secure way. You will default to an anxious, avoidant, or ambivalent way of showing up in the relationship. You can't override your nervous system. Trust me, I've tried. I bet you there's a lot of really well-intended people who have tried. I don't know one single person who's ever done it successfully without it requiring them to abandon themselves. And like I've said on this podcast before, doing this work for 10 years, I have never seen self-abandonment and self-neglect not have a consequence. If you're allergic to overwhelm, you don't have to force yourself to stay in intense dynamics that flood your nervous system. You can work with your nervous system, not against it. So we've been talking about attachment styles here for 4 weeks now, a month. So I want to bring in emotional allergies and tie it into nervous system work. I think it'll be pretty applicable for you guys. So let's start with an anxious attachment. An anxious attachment, high likelihood you are allergic to inconsistency, distance without communication, emotional withdrawal, avoidance, ambiguity. Don't start going around like pointing fingers and going, I'm allergic to that. You can't do that. I'm allergic to this. That's not what this is about. This is about internal understanding, internal clarity. So when these activations come up, a growing edge has presented itself. So if you identify with an anxious attachment or these allergies, You have the ability to discern between a momentary shift and a pattern. I want to remind you of an amazing saying. If it's hysterical, it's historical. That means that sometimes, like I was saying in the example of someone who has PTSD from battle, sometimes the reaction doesn't fit the present circumstances, but your nervous system still isn't lying. It's going, hey, somewhere on the spectrum of what happened to us, it's here. So if somebody in your life shows some distance or is human and has some level of inconsistency, you have boundaries. Go back to the boundary episodes. We've talked about discernment. You can have a hard conversation. I don't think we've really covered that too much on the podcast, but stay tuned. We'll talk about a lot of things. We don't have to be super rigid in the approach here that, like, if one allergy shows up in a relationship, I'm out. What I'm talking about is consistent unavailability, consistent lack of communication and distance, consistent emotional withdrawal, consistent ambiguity. That's data. Let me tell you, there are some things that I have some leeway for, and I have to. The more flexible the personality, the healthier the personality. So this is, again, not about being rigid, but there are some things in my life that I don't have three strikes for. I just don't. I've had enough of it in my life. So when these allergies present themselves, what's presented themselves is a growing edge. This isn't about, dropping the guillotine down if somebody that you're in a relationship with has made a mistake. This is about discerning between a momentary behavior or shift in someone, the way someone shows up, and a pattern. So if someone is consistently unavailable, if somebody is consistently withdrawing without communication, if someone is consistently ambiguous, you don't need to have three strikes. It means this is something that is not safe in my nervous system, which means my nervous system is not compatible with this person or the present level of awareness and functioning that they have. Let's talk about avoidant attachment. Avoidant attachment tends to be allergic to overwhelm, pressure, engulfment, lack of boundaries, enmeshment, feeling controlled. Now, the growing edge here is that you don't have to use distance as your only form of protection. You can use your voice. You can choose. You can establish boundaries within the relationship. So again, these are some things that come up in relationships, like your partner might engulf you. You might feel pressure within the relationship dynamic. That's human. You can express what you need. You can repair it. You can set boundaries. But if you consistently feel pressured, engulfed, enmeshed, criticized, but if you consistently feel overwhelmed, pressured in your relationship, engulfed, that there's a lack of boundaries, there's consistent data that there is enmeshment and you don't feel like an autonomous person, then this is not aligned with your nervous system, and you are allowed to honor that. Let's talk about ambivalent attachment. High likelihood, if you identify with having a default ambivalent attachment, that you're allergic to confusion. If you rewind back to the first guest episode I had on this podcast, Minka Kelly, and I quote, said, "I am allergic to confusion." You're allergic to mixed signals, words and actions not aligning, black and white thinking, meaning that there is a right or a wrong decision. And the growing edge is you don't have to freeze in those situations. There is no right or wrong decision, just aligned or not aligned. There is no right or wrong decision, just learning. So if confusion is constant, that's data. You might have been stuck growing up, but you are not stuck now. And these Allergies, these reactions in your body, are there to alert you, almost like a best friend, to say, hey, don't forget that this particular behavior, energy, interaction isn't safe for your well-being. So there is a cost to ignoring these allergies or alarms from our nervous system. When we ignore them, we end up abandoning ourself and abandoning our parts of self that had gone through the original experience. And most of the time, we don't even know it. But we might know it because we're flooded with anxiety, or we're over functioning in our relationships, or maybe we feel numb and disconnected. Maybe we've been stuck in something for a very long time and it's creating a lot of frustration within ourselves. But every time you override a sensitivity that is trying to protect you, you chip away at self-trust. And self-trust is the foundation of a secure attachment. If you don't trust your nervous system, you will outsource your safety to other people. And that puts safety outside of you. And I want to remind you again, we are not talking about this to become rigid. Again, the healthier the personality, the more flexible the personality. So if your partner judges you and has a human moment, that's human. Again, use your tools. We've covered a lot of them in this podcast already. You always have the opportunity to use your voice, to set a boundary, to repair. But if you were harmed by chronic judgment growing up, and now you are repeatedly criticized, belittled, or dismissed, that is not safe for your nervous system. And you don't need to override that. If you were ever in an abusive situation in the past and you encounter abuse again, please do not exercise the 3 strikes and you're out policy. Some things are just not safe, and they never will be safe, and you can own that. That is not being dramatic. That is self-protection. I had an experience in my life where I got called really awful names. And I have one absolute internal boundary that if you call me out of my name, you're not fucking with me anymore. Sorry. Period. End of story. Because I owe it to the young girl that was so confused in a verbally abusive situation that on my watch, we don't return back to those situations ever. And if it ever happens, I know for a fact that that is not safe for me. Period. End of story. So working with your nervous system looks like this. Remember, the first step in change is awareness. Notice the reaction. Start paying attention to the alarms. You might be in the position where you have numbed them out or desensitized them to them completely. A great choice might be going to someone who can help you identify those alarms going off within you. I also believe in you. And I think that if you start shining the light of consciousness and awareness on yourself, you might find out some things. So we notice the reaction. Pause before reacting. Get curious. Is this historical? Is that threat currently in my environment or in the story I'm telling myself? Look for patterns, not moments, right? Because people are human. I make mistakes, you make mistakes, and we will continue to make mistakes in relationships or impact each other because we're doing exactly what we came here to do in relationships. We're learning so much about ourselves and what needs to be healed. And then it is your choice to protect yourself. What is one of the greatest tools of self-protection? Boundaries. And you have access to an amazing simplified system. So protection might look like setting a boundary. It might look like using your voice and asking for what you need. It might look like adjusting access. So that goes back to the example I gave earlier, that if you don't want to be judged and you have data that someone's judgmental when you're around them, you can adjust access to the information you share by not disclosing anything you don't want to be judged about. You can leave, and you can always, always, always use discernment by protecting the vulnerable parts of yourself around people who aren't safe enough to hold them. Remember, patience and tolerance are two different energies. Patience says, hey, I can be patient, and that's an act of love while you're working on yourself, you're working on your behavior. Keep in mind, I said working on your behavior. Tolerance is different. Tolerance is sourced from fear. Tolerance requires self-abandonment. So you don't need to tolerate what harms you. There might be situations where your partner is working on something or they have a human moment. But if you're tolerating something harmful, it's time to shine the light of consciousness on it. So this week, I want to invite you to notice your emotional allergies. Maybe it's unavailability. Maybe it's judgment. Maybe it's criticism. Maybe it's rejection. Maybe it's confusion. Just notice. We're not here to judge. We're not here to suppress. We're not here to explode or control from this new awareness that we have. We're here to notice them and get curious. So what are you emotionally allergic to? Judgment, unavailability, overwhelm, inconsistency. One of my personal favorite allergies of mine, which is disregard. Ooh, my nervous system does not like disregard. Control. But when your body tightens up, when you feel those feelings or those reactions to those feelings, pause. And instead of asking what's wrong with me, ask, what protection does my nervous system need? And then choose accordingly and get some data. It is okay. You have full permission from here on out to protect your nervous system and prioritize your emotional well-being. Use discernment. Work with your sensitivities. Because the goal here isn't to try to override your nervous system and toughen up. The goal is alignment. Your nervous system doesn't lie. It communicates. And when you learn to listen, you can stop betraying yourself and start leading yourself based off your own truth. So go get curious with your emotional allergies. Next week, I am having an amazing guest on to talk about attachment and how attachment plays out in our relationships. I'm so excited. I can't wait to share her work with you guys. She's an amazing colleague of mine, and I adore her. So we're not done talking about this topic just yet, but again, always so grateful that you're here. I'll see you next week. That's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for being here and for doing this work. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Come connect with me over on TikTok at Robin Breckenridge or Instagram at Coach with Robin, where I share even more insights, tools, and conversations around boundaries, self-trust, relational healing, and so much more. And just a quick reminder, this podcast is for educational and personal growth purposes only. The insights and tools I share are based on my experience as a life and relationship coach and are meant for general guidance. Each person's story is unique, and the nuances of individual experiences can't always be addressed in this format. What's shared here may not be applicable to every situation, especially those involving abuse, oppression, severe mental illness, or systematic harm. If you or someone you know is in crisis, please seek support from a qualified mental health professional or emergency resources. Thank you for listening and for showing up for yourself in this way. Take care, and I'll see you next time.